What is up, mathematicians? And today we are going to be talking about using our fraction benchmark numbers to help us figure out if our answers to our adding and subtracting equations are reasonable when we are using fractions. Before we get into our lesson today, let's look at our I will statement. Remember, your I will statements are your goals for this lesson. They are what we are trying to work on and learn more about throughout our time together today. As we continue on in our lesson, make sure you have your mind focused on these three things and showing them to your teacher. I will read the I will statement first, and then we will read it again a second time together. Make sure you're reading it nice and loudly so I can hear you, but no shouting necessary. For today's I will statements, they are as followed. Listen first. I will estimate the fraction totals. Say it with me. I will estimate the fraction totals. The next one. Listen. I will define fraction benchmarks. I want you to say this one to your neighbor. Turn to them and say it with them. Ready? I will define fraction benchmarks. Did you say it to your neighbor? If you didn't, let's say it one more time. Ready? I will define fraction benchmarks. And our last one for today, I'm going to read it first and then we will read it together. I will reason my estimation. Read that one, read it back to me. I will reason my estimation. Good job, mathematicians. Let's get into some review before we get into the lesson. This is a quick review activity that we're going to practice going from fractions to decimals. For this activity, you guys will need your whiteboard and a marker. Pause the video if you need to grab those supplies and come back when you're ready. For our activity, fraction to decimal, I am going to write a fraction on the board. If I were to write this fraction, there are different ways you can say this fraction. You can say this fraction in unit form by saying 1/10. You can also say this fraction in decimal form. You can say 0 and 1/10. So you can write that out if you want. 0 and 1/10. Oh, and 1/10. So there's different ways you can write this out. For this activity, I will write the fraction on the board, and your job is to write it in either unit form or decimal form and hold it up. You can keep track of your score by seeing if you get it correct by putting 1 point. If you put multiple answers down that are correct, give yourself a point correct for each answer. So I would get 3 points for this one. If you have any questions, pause the video and ask your teacher now. If not, let's get started. Erase your boards if you have anything written on them. Our first fraction that we are going to work with is, what are different ways you can write this fraction? Need more time? Pause the video now. You can write this fraction like 3/10. If you have 3/10 down, give yourself a check. Remember, you need to have the THS at the end of this because we're talking about decimal form. You also could write this fraction as 0 and 3/10. Give yourself a point if you did that. And you can also write it out as 0 and 3/10. If you have any of these on your board, give yourself a point for whichever ones you have. Ready for another one? Let's do, drum roll please, this fraction. Pause the video if you need more time. This fraction can be written as 7/10. You could have the 0 and 7/10 to show it written in decimal form, or you could write it out, 0 and 7 I'm going to write tenths underneath so you can see it. Tenths. Remember that THS at the end, tenths, showing us it's in decimal form. Let's keep going. This one you can get some bonus points on. What are some different ways we can write this fraction? Pause if you need more time. We can write this fraction as 5/10. We can also write it out as a decimal. And we can also write that decimal out in word form for us. 0 and 5/10. But was that all we could have done? Give yourself a point for whichever one of those you wrote down. There's more that we could have done as well. We could have wrote that 5/10 is also 1/2. If we know it's 1/2, we also know it's decimal, as we can see here, it's 0 and 5/10, or 0.5. So if we were to say 1/2 as a decimal, we would say 0 and 5/10. Everybody say that with me. 0 and 5/10. If you notice that 5/10 was also 1/2, give yourself a bonus point for that one. Nice job, mathematicians. You'll still need your whiteboard for this next activity, and we're going to need a lined piece of paper or a straight edge to draw some number lines. Go get those materials and come back when you're ready. Today, we are going to take all of our math skills that we have learned in the past 2 weeks and the strategies we have been working with to add and subtract unlike fractions and apply those skills as we use mental math today to estimate if our answer is going to be over 1 or under 1 before we solve it. What I want you to do on your whiteboards is first draw a number line where you can use your straight edge to help you draw your number line and put 0 on one side and 1 on the other. This may take you a minute, so please pause the video and come back when everyone is able to hold up their whiteboards and show us you have the 2 lines drawn. The problem we are going to be working with is 1/2 plus 3/4. Write this on your whiteboard and cap your marker. We are going to practice solving this expression, but you guys are not going to be using any of the strategies we used in the past week. We are going to be using mental math. If we were to look at the 2 fractions we have here, let's plot them on our number lines quickly. Grab your pen markers for me, and let's put them up here. If I look at 1/2, I know that a half could be 50% of something or 50 cents of a dollar when I'm at the store. So I know that a half is the same as 5/10 or 0.5. We saw that in our example too when we practiced going from fractions to decimals. Since I know that 1/2 as a fraction is going to land at around 0 and 5/10, that's where it's going to fall on my board here. I know it's going to be smack dead in between these guys. So I'm going to find where I think the middle is, and I'm going to mark that as 1/2. Mark that on your whiteboards now. 1/2. That's about in the middle. Now, that's not all we have in our expression. Cap your markers after you wrote 1/2 and listen. Eyes back on the board. We also have 3/4 over here. And I know 3/4 is more than a half because half of a whole is 2/4. So if this was 2/4, it would be equal to a half. But it's not. It's bigger. It's 3/4. It's one bigger than 2/4. So that tells me that our 3/4 needs to be between a half and 1. On our second number line, uncap your markers. Draw a line halfway through. We're not going to label this line yet. Put your markers down. Listen. Just like we talked about before with 1/2, 3/4 is the same as 75%, or 3/4 is equal to 75 cents. That also helps me remember how to, when something is split in quarters, how to remember its percentages. Since 3/4 is 75 cents, 3/4 also equals 75%. if I'm looking at my board here, 1/2 was here, 1/2 is here, 3/4 has to be somewhere in between those. So I'm going to put a line in between my 1/2 and my 1/2, and I'm going to label it 3/4. When I think about the total value of this expression, I'm going to want to think if it's greater or less than 1. Let's look at the two fractions we have on our number lines. Everybody cap your markers. I'm not even going to use mine, and put your markers to the side for now. We have 1/2 up here. If I think how many more it's going to take me to get to a whole, this whole section is 1/2, and this whole section is 1/2. Since 3/4 is greater than 1/2, if we were to add these two numbers up, we can estimate that our answer is going to be greater than 1. Or 1/2 plus 3/4 is greater than 1. It's kind of like when we were talking about cents. 1/2 is 50 cents. And 3/4 is like 75 cents. If we were to add up these totals, they would be over $1. So plus $1. It's going to be over $1. If we were to add up our fractions, it's going to be greater than 1. Let's write that answer on the board before we try and solve. So 1/2 plus 3/4, let's write our reasoning here, is going to be greater than, show that with your alligator. Remember, he always wants to eat whatever number is bigger. Is going to be greater than 1. If we were to solve this problem, let's go through and figure it out. Before, we talked about 3/4, we know is bigger because 1/2 of 4 is 2/4. So if we had 1/2 plus 2/4, that's like 1/2 plus 1/2. That gives us 1. But we still have something left over down here. We only took 2 out of that. So what's 3 minus 2? 1. Good. So we have 1 left over of our fourths. So if we were to actually solve this problem, we would get 1 and 1/4. So our estimate here, where we write, give a thumbs up or thumbs down. Yeah, we were right. Our answer ended up being over the total of 1. If we looked at our problems here, we drew it out on number lines to help us show our reasoning a little bit. We were able to explain that if two fractions combined and both of the fractions are 1/2 or greater than 1/2, then the total is going to be more than 1. You guys are going to continue to do some practice problems as a class before you get some independent practice. If you ever get stuck, use your number lines to help you. Sketch out a number line to see if your fractions equal 1/2 or if they're less than 1/2. If you have two fractions that are less than 1/2, then your answer is going to be less than a whole because you need 2 halves to add up to 1 whole. Good luck, mathematicians, practicing. You guys got this.